Hello and welcome to the Golden Flower, a sanctuary for your creative soul. I'm super excited to be here with Angela, and we have our episode 7 already. We've racked up 7 episodes, and it's going to be all about the creative journey. And what's very intriguing about today's episode is we're going to explore the creative journey by sharing with each other details of our creative journey that we really don't know about each other. We've jumped into this collaboration and it really has, just, however long it's been that we've been doing these episodes, exploring these different topics, diving into these different exercises, has really moved such a lot forward. And it feels like the right time to go back a little bit and put some of these jigsaw pieces together about how we've got where we are. When we put our intention into our creativity, we often don't realize that we're embarking on a journey, and it's only really becoming a journey when we get to a certain point and we realize that we've hit certain stages and we look back and it all kind of makes sense. I've chosen this little very short quote because I feel like it just reminds us why it's so important to make sure that we get on this creative journey one way or another. So I'll kick it off. The one thing that you have that nobody else has is you, your voice, your mind, your story, your vision. So write and draw, build, play and dance and live only as you can. For those of you who are listening for the first time, introducing. I'm Gemma Kaufman. I'm an abstract artist. I'm a creative coach and a space holder for transformational processes. And I'm with Angela. Angela Industry.
Yes, and I'm Angela Levesque, and I am a transformational guide, a digital artist, and a wordsmith. I like to write all manners of things, and I'm based in Boise, Idaho. I I love that little quote. Where did you get that from, by the way?
Yeah, okay. I've just got like a website here. I'm gonna put it in the notes. I was, I was just trawling, found it. It's not attributed to anyone that I can see. It's attributed to this website. I feel like it might be like a mishmash of like some things that other people have said, but this is the one I went for because I just like that it included all those different elements. Yeah.
And yes, and I mean that to me is what the creative journey is. It's about being able to surrender, to kind of relax into ourselves, to find our voice, because anybody who starts out doing anything, you usually start with imitation, right? You read somebody that you really like and you connect with how they write, and then you try and write and you mimic that. And to me, that's like the highest form of flattery, is that you like something enough to try and imitate it. But the challenge is when you really are on this journey is to move out of that place of mimicry and into a place of authenticity, and really finding your unique voice, and even just like the way you carry yourself, the way you move, all of that is, for me, what kind of is at the core of the creative journey, is moving from that place of um, imitation into authenticity. And
Hmm.
that spirals, and it's big and it's small and it's, it's macro and then it's micro, and you kind of spiral through that exploration over and over again.
Yeah, I hear creativity as a way of being, a way of being. And as you're talking, I'm like, okay, you're already sharing little pieces of like your philosophy, which underpin, I think, a bit of your journey. Um, I thought it might be playful to start off, as we're kind of like going to be sharing bits from the past, whatever we've decided to share, to start off with. what do we know? Shall I go? I'll jump in and say, um, so far I'm aware that Angela she's a digital artist and she makes these stunning digital artworks that are based with sacred geometry, very intricate, lots of layers, beautifully alive, and some of them actually move. They're like living meditations, absolutely stunning. So I'm very curious how she's gone from kind of writing to making these very, very beautiful, perfectly symmetric kind of living paintings. And so there's that curiosity. I know that you're a prolific writer and that's taken many forms. I know that you've got a few almost there, um, like book projects that's come up in our conversations. And I know that you were living in Japan, which I'm incredibly jealous about. And that when you came back, there was like a kind of some kind of catalyst to do with perhaps being there or coming back. I don't really know the details. That's just something that I recall. And then, yeah, I'm hoping that you'll go back kind of further because I kind of went way back because I feel like those very early foundational experiences. Anyway, I said we would keep this brief. That's kind of like what I'm aware of so far. I don't know if you want to do the same.
I actually think you know more about me than I know about you. I only
Okay.
recently found out that you had a master's degree. So that was really
Mhm.
interesting. I obviously know that you're an abstract artist, that you've done coaching, that you use artistic mediums in your helping people explore their own inner landscapes. Um, I also know, and this I thought was incredibly cool, during your time in London, you worked with youth that were, I guess, troubled, that had a lot of stuff going on in their lives, and you helped them use art to kind of move through some of their uh, difficult emotions and to move through some of their frustrations and challenges and to get to know themselves on a deeper level so that some of that other stuff maybe wasn't as pulling so much of their attention. And so I thought that that was really cool, and you actually had an exhibit with them and their artwork, and I thought that was really amazing. And that your family sees you as a bit of a wild child, and that you're a dreamer and you love fantasy, and people in your orbit always wanted you to be more, what's the word I want to use? Like
Practical.
practical. Very good.
No chance.
And now I know that you have decided, you and your family have uprooted, and you're hoping to live off grid in Portugal, which is also something that
You just tripled. Your workout is triple mine. You started off by saying that I know more. No, that's really great. That's a lovely reflection. And it makes me realize that we're probably going to have to do a part two of this because I'm going like way, way back. And that whole bit, like you say, of like working with young people is so huge and such a big part. But I hadn't really thought to go there. But I also want to throw in that I know as well that your spiritual journey has been huge and also that you're coming from a teaching background as I am, and that you've really honed this capacity to space hold and truly like we'll get to the end of the episode and there's going to be an opportunity to actually experience some of this transformational meditation that Angela has really, I don't know what the word is, like honed, I think is a good one. Refined, really refined, something very, very unique and special. So there we go. We've blown in each other's trumpets quite nicely there.
let's take a little brief break. And when we get back, let's dive into some of those stories and explore each other's personal journeys. So yeah, I'd like to start talking about sacred geometry. I've always been interested in like the imagery, and interestingly enough, my husband, and he didn't even know at the time, he ended up getting a a 3/4 sleeve tattoo of the flower of life. And then at the top around his shoulder, he actually has Metatron's cube. And I said to him at the time, I said, you do realize that you just put a whole bunch of like sacred imagery on your body. And he's like, not really. I just saw this. And I was, drawn to the imagery and I thought, hey, that would be a cool tattoo. And then I started explaining to him some of the significance. And I thought that was just um, kind of perfect that my husband, who I've been with for 25 years at this point, would just go, and it's like he's received things through osmosis or something by being with
That's
me.
cool.
And so how sacred geometry, how I started making these moving meditations is, as you mentioned, I moved back from Japan, and that was such an amazing experience. And coming back, and uh, it was COVID, and everything was just different here. It's like I had had, and yet very the same. So I had had these very expansive opportunities. You're living in a completely different country where is in a different language, based on a lot of different, like it's not a Western country in the traditional sense that it's based on a lot of those like foundational philosophies and such. So, and it's, more based in social harmony and social cohesion, which really changes the way that the society functions. And then you get slammed back into the
Mm.
United States. And I went through a little bit of a mini, I guess, midlife crisis is the best way to explain it. Like I just came back, nothing fit. I didn't know if I should go back to my old work. Some of my relationships with my friends had obviously changed. They had been living their lives for 3 years, and I come back and I've changed a lot too. And I just, one day I'm like looking online and I see sacred geometry, and I think in my mind, wouldn't it be cool if I could make that move? And at this point, I just really needed something because there were so many questions. I just needed something to anchor my attention to. So I go and I do some searching and I find this cool software that I've never worked with. It's called Omni Geometry, and it's sort of a Photoshop for sacred geometry. It's really, it functions very similar in the background like that. And so I like puzzles. I like figuring out how to put things together. It's like, okay, so I want to make this move. The software in itself does have a little bit of an animation feature, but not really. And I thought, this is so cool because it's so mesmerizing, and it's also not cerebral in the sense that, like I create guided meditations and I lead people through things, and I choose my words very specifically, but I'm really like connecting first through the mind. Now, if you take shapes that are already embedded with like wisdom and kind of, they're universal patterns, right? That aren't, you look through them visually. So, yes, they go through the visual cortex, but the experience and the energy of them transcends like language. And you're just imbued with the energy that it's held, and like the spiritual significance of these symbols. So I loved that idea. I loved something that could just speak directly to me without my mind having to be turned on. So, but then also I love my mind being turned on, and I'm a nerd, and I like learning how to software works. So I'm like learning this new thing, and then I'm creating these really beautiful, meaningful, um, I call them moving meditations, and they're quite mesmerizing. And all you have to do, I start all of them the same, just breathe in, breathe out, receive, just receive these things. But it was so important for me at that time to have something, like I said, to sort of anchor myself, because I was in this really liminal space with so many uncertainties and questions remaining unanswered. And that's normally, I know exactly like this is what I'm doing, and I create frameworks and I create processes, and you work with me. Like, okay, like I like things to be concrete. And so I was like, well, that's not available to me right now. So I decided to dive into something completely different. Like I said, that is more just about receiving and connecting to those parts of me that don't need language and don't need, logic and rationality. And so that was, I didn't realize it at the time. It sort of took me like a year out. I was like, why was that so important? But it was because I needed to expand parts of me that would allow me to deal with the uncertainty and the liminality that I was going through. So that was kind of, and then that has led to a whole bunch of other things, but diving into that in the way that I did really helped me kind of get out of that downward spiral that I was starting to embark on. So anyway.
Wow. So it feels like you received a strong call. I want to say that you also had a call to abstraction, but I don't know if that's correct. I always think of abstraction as being very irregular and, ultra expressive, but it is abstraction, right? It's perfect abstraction. And what I mean by abstraction is it was this call to go beyond words, beyond that thinking process. That's where we find expansion. And I love what you're saying there, that call kind of came like a rescue at a time when things were just not flowing. And I can just imagine the crunch. I mean, I've had nothing that could compare to that um, juxtaposition of being in Japan and then coming back at that particular time to go try and crunch back into pick up the threads of life before. I can really see how that must have just been. And that again just brings me to the beauty. We talk about that a lot, the beauty of what's available with creative experience and choosing it or letting it choose you, being receptive. Talked a lot about receptivity to something that can pull you through a difficult stage of the journey because of your life journey, because some bits flow and some bits don't, and we need something that's like the vehicle, the pull, the thread, that something that extra something. And it really sounds like you found it. Like when you talk about it, it's that liveliness of, and I can imagine what it must be to be immersed in them while you're working like that kind of. I don't know. I kind of don't want to know to like shatter the magic because you've told me that it's very, very intricate and it's very, very intensely layered and probably involves all kind of things that my non-tech mind just can't
Several
compute.
different, yes, types of software to actually create the animations, because that was the part is I wanted them to move in a way and I didn't know how to do that. So um so I just figured it out. Like I just, well, what if I create this, and what if I use this piece of software? So I end up using 3 or 4 pieces of software to create a single moving meditation. But that's what I was talking about too, about the macro and the micro. So in one sense, I'm diving into abstraction, but in the other sense, I'm using the most perfect shapes you could possibly, right? Like there's no abstraction in like circles and lines and more circles and lines and weaving together. But to your point, and that's why everything is such a blend of divine masculine, divine feminine coming into divine union, right? Is yeah, there you couldn't think of something more perfect than sacred geometry. And yet diving into that was my invitation into abstraction.
Mm. They're so resonant, aren't they? I mean, I think it takes a bit of courage to work with those kind of symbols. Honestly, I do. I feel like this part, I mean, it would be a bit like, oh, am I allowed in here? Like it's special, so I need a special pass to kind of work with these. And I'm sure that part of your call is like, in a way, you have that sense of like reverence, but also the determination to make it worthwhile, like I'm kind of curious how you could like did you kind of did you have the end in mind? Was it like I kind of have an idea about how I want these to look, or did they kind of show you along the way we can look like this?
Well, I want to speak first to your point about um, using, very sacred shapes. So I have made a couple moving meditations with Metatron's cube, um, with the Merkaba. But generally I create new uh new shapes. So I understand, and this will answer your second question. I understand, like say I want to work with square or cube, right? Square is four, it's about stability, it's about foundational energy. So I sort of go into meditation and I feel like what is the concept that I'm trying to work with or invite into my being. So for example, then I'll take the number 4 and I'll work with square. And so I've created a whole moving meditation. I've created two versions, one that has a overlay of voice and then one that's just the symbols. But there's something, because you do have to have a certain amount of reverence, I think, for especially shapes that have such a rich history in our ancient wisdom teachings. So I didn't want to just be like pumping out these sacred shapes and images, because I felt that that took away from a lot of the specialness. So I do have a couple of ones that I do create into meditations, but mostly I create unique shapes and images because of the level of reverence that I think that needs to go along with this. Because like they've been around for some of the, for who knows, like millennia, and yeah, I didn't want it to exploit them to get, likes or something. So I did really think about that. And so, but to answer your second question, it really is kind of thinking about what is it that I want to embody? What is it that I would like to invite into my being? And then using like numerology and some of the mythology around the tarot and that sort of thing. I'll get, okay, so today I'm going to work with number 8, or I'm going to work with 12. And then I dive into the significance. And from that stuff, arises.
That is so interesting. I hadn't got that far in my thinking about how did you that part of the process, that there was this kind of like, okay, start with 4, go into everything that you know about before, and that's some, it's a journey within a journey. Do you feel like there's more to go, there's more to come, that like, because I want to share more of them, and we're still trying to figure out what is the best way to share them. I kind of feel like I do want to sit in a room in a cushion on a big screen and just have them like pulse or something like that. I mean, but like Instagram can't cope with them because they're too complex, and even just like, I don't know, like, have you? I feel like I'm just keep interviewing you, but I can't help it. Like, well, where are they going? Do you have that sense?
I just get a tap. It's like the same way that I get a tap that I need to write something, that, I just get a little, it's time to work
Mm-hmm.
on. And then I just make myself available for that. So I don't, I think that if we wanted to get into all of my issues, that being consistent is one. So it's like I'll dive into that and then I'm like, oh, what's over there? Something shiny is, good. And then so I'll create it and then I'm off to something else. And then I'll come back and I'll create something else. And then I'm off somewhere else. And that's actually been one of my, I think, greatest challenges, but probably somewhat has served me. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep doing it.
As you were talking in that last bit about the distraction and the coming back, if you think about a central point and then going away and coming back, and then the slightly overlapping ellipse, then you get sacred geometry to kind of keep going and returning. I'm sure there's probably a lot in there. I think it's very tempting. I have it myself, like this idea, like, oh, especially now as like a mother, when I get these moments of perfect clarity and energy, and it's diffused, but that kind of idea, like, oh, what would it be like if I could pursue this full time, which is for various reasons not going to happen. It's kind of like, I don't know. I kind of, at this stage, I'm pretty clear that it's actually kind of a gift that we don't get to spend full time on everything. I don't know. You'll have to challenge me to elaborate on that another time, but there's something there, and that's good for us because we don't have that option, you know. Mm.
Well, and I think too, and Elizabeth Gilbert, she talks about this in her book Big Magic, about turning your creativity into your profession, and how there's pros and cons to that, and why you shouldn't be so, quick to rush to turn some of your gifts into the way that you make your living, because it can, like if I was to sit at my computer all day and work on these images, there would be some trade-offs there. Okay, so Gemma, I just spent a long time talking about one small point in my life, but I think that it kind of illustrates the idea of a creative journey, some of the challenges you come on, and sometimes when you don't even have the opportunity to recognize that you're on some type of a journey. It's just sometimes you grab onto a lifeline, and that takes you somewhere. So I'd like to hear a little bit more, and you can choose whichever one you want to draw from, but like a little bit more about a, a creative journey that you've experienced.
Hmm. I mean, so I just want to share that when I get asked about my creative journey, I have a tendency to go to my first painting as like the point where it all kicked off and that painting came through and that's where I found traction and that's where everything flowed from. But preparing to talk today, I was really excited to find that like a bit of my memory unlocked in a different way. I was like, hang on a minute, like it's never quite sat right to be like, I just did that painting and it just kind of flowed that way and I just used my intuition. I was just super happy with it. Like I don't, you know what I mean? There was I've identified three stages that occurred in the years running up to that. And that's where I put my attention to kind of, I feel like, especially if I feel like my story might help um, someone who really struggles with having a process or structure or courage to kind of jump into their creative journey or their art life. So I can only really do this by offering context. So it's don't panic. It's going to seem like I'm wanging way out, and you're going to be like, she's never going to stop talking. But
I,
I've got
you're right.
notes to try and keep me in check. So just for a bit of context, I feel like I do want to say that I did go to art college at the time when you normally go to uni, but that I didn't come out with any kind of clarity, confidence. I just survived that experience. I was highly stressed, confused, overwhelmed, and yeah, just came out in a spin. And then I feel like for that to make sense, then I kind of need to share briefly that um, in my personality type being an INFP, which connects to the Myers-Briggs. So if you don't know, I'm just going to say in one sentence that Carl Jung came up with this brilliant framework for different personality types that basically there are four components of every personality that um, feeling, sensation, intuition, and thinking. And that we experience each one of those either inwardly or outwardly. And depending on what combination of those elements you experience inwardly or outwardly, that gives you your type. And so my type is the INFP, which is intuitive, introverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving. And so in a nutshell, this type is known to be very intensely idealistic, like really big imagination, known for having creative gifts, but kind of lacking organizational ability, struggles with structure. So it's very painful for our types. I'll just speak for myself that we go very big in our creative aspirations, and it can be really crushing. And I mean crushing to just not feel like we know how to go through a series of steps, some kind of process to realize these things. Many of us have ADHD, which I do as well, and it just compounds this kind of gap between the big imaginative vision. So I came out of art school, went straight into training as a teacher. And after 10 years of teaching, I had matured a little, thankfully, and grounded a little bit, thankfully. And I got this idea that I was going to do a master's, which you know, and I did a creative I felt like I wanted to go back to art school and give it a second shot, but I kind of was like, based on my other experience, I don't think there's any point. I think I'll waste it. So I scaffolded to where I was and did a master's for teachers, uh, creative, create, creative media education. And the key word there is creative. As part of that journey, I had to really deeply go into creativity. What is it? How do we create that for our students? How do we create conditions for creativity to flourish? So some more context is that the kind of students that I was working with, secondary age students, that means like 13 to 16, excluded from the mainstream school once, maybe twice, predominantly male, and very, very short attention spans. So anything that I ever came up with in the art classroom had to be like quick results, low effort, quick results. And so on that journey, it took me into surrealism and the Aleppo poets, automated writing, and the idea of random as a starting point. And things like games, random starting points and games. Exquisite Corpse, the surrealist game that we do at parties. Do you know this one? Draw something. It's a figure. It's called Exquisite Corpse. You have a piece of paper. One person would draw a head, fold it over so the next person can't see. They draw the body, they fold it over, the next person can't see, the next person draws the legs and so forth. You get a reveal, and it's often quite odd and it's quite entertaining. There's also like poem structures where you can have a pool of random nouns, adjectives, and verbs, and you can put them together, and a poem will pop out. So there's a sequence: adjective, noun, verb, adjective, noun. I picked one out just so you could hear one, and it had the word introversion in it. So time-honored introversion, carpet-hooded tyranny. So I really got into this because it's like this nonsensical, quite whimsical, but somehow often like slightly, it's like nonsensical, but a little bit profound. And it would generate like loads and loads quickly. And so I was doing stuff like this with the students, and it really, they loved it. I also loved it because that kind of getting a quick result, this sense that creativity was just available. You could just kind of turn it on and get these kind of, what I liked about it particularly was the randomness generated better results often than the mind did. You couldn't think your way into those kind of strange combinations of words that were very evocative, that kind of hooded tyranny. Like, you're not going to come up with that. But when they come together, it was like, oh, there's something here. And I went further into it with William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg and all this kind of like remix reality, throw off the constraints. I mean, I think with where I was at in myself, that liberation of restraint was like very, very, very appealing. So this is like, I'm drawing attention to this idea of random, because when I get asked about my paintings, people often ask me how I start, and I'll say, just make a mark. But I don't often elaborate on why I'm so confident about that, or why it's so natural for me to just say, it doesn't really matter, just like make a mark. So it was because on my master's, we had to link it to our teaching practice. So I was coming up with ideas and then I was trying them out in the classroom. They liked it, but I definitely liked it more. And again, I kept going with that flow of surrealism and collage, like random images together, really common in school. And actually, I was kind of a bit put off by collage because I didn't really feel like it was done that well. But because I came to it again with better quality imagery, um, again, I was devising things. And, when you have really old National Geographics and you've got, incredible photography, incredible landscapes, mysterious people in mysterious places, dreamlike imagery. When you start pulling those out and assembling them, what I liked about that as well was you would create something. It's all fragmented. You don't think too much about how things go together, but then when you appraise the whole, that intuition kicks in and suddenly there's like a story developing, you're making connections. So again, it wasn't entirely new, but because I went into it with more attention, again, there was that kind of surprise reveal, like the poetry, surprise reveal, the color, surprise reveal. These things like really implanted a kind of an expectation within me that you do these kind of processes and then you kind of wait to the end and that something's going to come through. That's and then the third one just very like kind of pulls it together, which is and then I don't know, and a good example of collage, I feel like again used in schools overdone, but Joseph Cornell, both 2D and 3D, putting objects together. So it's like you'll look at these things and you can't really put into words. They make you feel something. You can't really say what it is. And what you feel kind of changes depending on what day you go. And so again, something similar, like a beyond words evocative experience of fragments coming to a whole and our meaning making machines kind of working with that and offering something, that kind of story, pulling you into a story. And then alongside all of this, because of doing the masters, and I was really reaching for change, like I wanted a new way of living my life, my professional life, my personal, like everything. And as I mentioned before, like these INFP, we struggle with emotions and we struggle with, we just, it's been a long journey to kind of slowly start to kind of master internal dynamics. And I've always doodle drawn as a way of releasing stress. And I've done that since I've been a child. Like it's like the release valve. The pressure gets too much, this relentless sense of pressure, put it into a drawing, a doodle drawing. And I went to that process and I magnified it a bit. And I was encouraging the students to do this as well. Like you could call it art therapy. I call it plugging in. I call it catch an emotion before it's caught you and plug it in. And again, because of this idea of like a starting point can be random, and also this idea that meaning is something that you receive, or the thing that you need to see is something that comes at the end. I found that really freeing. Like I don't have to draw anything. I just need to pick up the pen and that's enough. And then I'll take a look at the end. So these three, I'm calling them like components. You can see how that combination of the randomness, the fragmented elements that come together as a whole, and this kind of freedom to free flow. So when I do get to that point of painting, like many years later, I'm drawing really heavily from that kind of bit of training that went on. And I've never, and this is quite a new realization about the impact that had. And so I was thinking, what is it really? Because it's really, I think about like a quality of attention that when I go into the painting state, I don't worry about how it starts. I don't worry about how it goes. But I have this quality of attention that is kind of expectant, like there's going to be something that comes out of this, which for a dreamer type like me, who used to really struggle with like overwhelming, negative, depressive, worst case scenario places, to experience through the creative process that openness of curiosity and light expectation, that just by keeping going and by staying kind of, I want to use this word, like almost like devotedly alert, I don't drift off or go anywhere as I normally do. When I'm focusing on painting and drawing in this way, I'm zoomed in, I'm zoomed out. But that alertness, the staying in the present and just waiting to see something, probably like 5 year gap maybe between the masters and the moment when I was actually ready to pick up the paintbrush and tune in with, and you know, I've blogged quite a fair bit about that first painting, about how I really went all in. I brought everything I've got, and of course, everything I had included those former experiences. I just hadn't registered the impact that they had. So there we go.
So you said a couple of things that I thought was interesting. You used a version of devotion, which I
Mm.
thought was interesting. And when I think about devotion, it has that such a deep quality of reverence and love. And I wonder, what are you devoted to?
Mm. Such a good question. I'm gonna get another reveal now. I'm devoted to the possibility. I'm devoted to the idea that this playfulness, that somehow, some way, something is going to come through. It's really quite childlike. I'm devoted to that potential that through, through the many layers of mark making and layers of painting. I don't know, it's not always as intensely layered as I'm kind of describing, but there's this feeling of needing to stay with what is. Oh, I can't, do you know, there's a part here which is for someone like me who was always on the run from herself, trying to escape the difficult feelings and all this kind of stuff, to be with what is and somehow come to a place of acceptance. I was kind of devoted to that possibility, to that potential of grounded acceptance as well. I would feel like I would somehow be able to map and locate myself in that process of what starts random and what is all quite arbitrary in a way, visual mark making, but the problem solver has a desire to see something, and I think that desire is very, very, very strong. The need is very, very strong. Does
Well,
that answer?
that was going to be my second question is because I find the medium of painting, for example, or creating art in the more traditional sense, like not in writing or that sort of thing. In my mind, you would have some idea. Like when you're taking paint to canvas, you're thinking, okay, so I'm going to create this landscape or whatever it is. But as I'm listening to you speak, it has less to do with the creation or like the beauty making than it has to do with that revelatory experience. That's really like what drives you is being able to dive deeper into your inner landscape and learn something rather than create something beautiful or create something like useful or specific. Does that make sense? Like I'm going to
Yeah.
paint this bowl of fruit to paint that bowl of fruit, but it's not about the bowl of fruit. It's about what's uncovered in that process.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one day I want to sit down and give the bowl of fruit a go. I think what you're describing there is a very INFP trait of like this need to somehow work with the inner realms, the inner world. But also like I wanted to share those steps of my process because it brought me back into creative flow because I did not know if I'd put pressure on myself to try and create a painting in a particular way with a particular kind of outcome, I wouldn't have got anywhere. I needed, in the same way like the students I work with, I needed low-hanging fruits, quick wins, an experience of that creative flow, an experience that that things could come through as long as I paid attention. It's like it is quite a different way. I don't know, most painters or artists, I get the impression that they have an intention, they have a vision for their work. I don't. I have a commitment to a way of working that I kind of deeply trust that I kind of keep going, and I kind of trust my sensibilities, and I do trust that something beautiful will come out of it. But I'm off to get there. I often almost push myself to make messy, horrid paintings that I need to problem solve. If I go directly to, I want to make a beautiful painting. No, I don't know how, I don't, if I could do that, I would probably do it. I don't know how to do that. So these stages were like things I stumbled into that gave me like, oh, I don't, it doesn't matter that I don't have a process. Look, if you play these kind of games, you get better results than the mind can even come up with. That's great. Let me work with that. Let me come in like with from that angle.
I think we'll have to do another episode later in the future where we explore a little bit more of each of our our journeys. Um,
Mm.
but we're going to take a short break. When we get back, we're going to share an upcoming workshop that we're going to be hosting that's going to help us do exactly what I think Gemma was talking about there when
Yeah.
we get So we have developed this workshop that we're going to be offering on April 14th. So you can go to my website at chaosandlight.com. We will also have it linked in the show notes. And right front and center on my homepage, you'll be able to follow a link to sign up for that. We are offering it for free. We're very excited. This is our first Gemma and Angela collaboration, and it's called Developing Intuition for Your Creative Journey. And so I'm going to let Gemma here explain a little bit about what we'll be doing and yeah, what you'll be able to get from it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, in this segment, we're normally inviting to the creative challenge, and we were just discussing that it's very hard to find the time. We find that it's hard to find the time to choose to have these creative experiences and explorations, and we really want to. So we were like, okay, I think it's time for us to use some accountability. Let's hit on a time. Let's open this up. Let's invite people in, and yeah. So some of these ideas that we were touching on today. So I think the experience is going to be that we're going to be able to go in with some meditation, and Angela's going to guide us through some of her meditations that we were talking about earlier in the episode. And then I'm going to be guiding us through some simple mark making, like no artistic drawing experience needed for this workshop at all. It's so simple and so enjoyable. And um, the aim is really that when we have a kind of expanded experience or coaching experience, something that is um, taking us out of our habitual ways of thinking and putting us into the unknown. If there's a way of anchoring that in drawing, I'm going to say mark making, it's more mark making than drawing, then this can have, as I say, like a, a communication, some information for us, something there. And working in this way really does strengthen our intuition. This idea that there is a feedback loop readily available every time that we really want to expand our thinking process, like have an experience, anchor it into something visual, and then be able to receive and reabsorb. Our intuition responds so well to this, and everything we've been talking about, the creative journey, intuition is such a huge part of it. How do we know which ways to go and which things to put our attention on and what things to notice, because there's so much going on. Intuition is such a huge part of this. So yeah, we want to invite you to this meditative coaching intuition strengthening experience, which is a vital tool for this journey, and it will be fun.
Yes, well,
And
I'm
like I say,
excited.
it's our first time to bring our skills together, our approaches together, and we'll put all the details in the show notes. And yeah, it's coming around because we're almost in April. So yes, have we said how long it's going to be? Like, we,
So April 14th, it'll be at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, and it'll run about 75 minutes. And all you need to bring is yourself, a sketch pad and a pencil or a pen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah,
Myra.
so we hope that you'll be able to join us. And if you're not able to join us live, please register anyway, and we'll send the link to the recording after it's done.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that is our show for today. If you want to connect with Gemma, you can find her at gemmakaufman.com. If you'd like to connect with myself, and you can go to chaosandlight.com. If you want to find us on Instagram, it's at golden flower. No, is it the? I don't
No,
have
Golden Flower Podcast.
golden.
Yes, come find us and give us some love there. We could do with some love. I have not mastered the algorithm there, and as a full-time mom to my toddler, I'm not likely to. So do come and connect with us there and share it with people that you think would enjoy having these little reminders about the creative journey. There's a bunch of posts that are gonna go up related to this episode, some nice self-reflective questions and so forth. So yeah, let's connect on there.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Follow the aliveness, nurture that spark, and we'll see you next week.